Compost is the soul of your garden. Your gardening success literally begins and ends with your compost. But what exactly is compost? And how do we make it? And how do our gardens use it? Today, we're going to get a little bit wet and a lot dirty as we answer all those questions. As well, let's take a deep dive into the world of composting, and I'll give you my 5 best tips to help you become a master composter. And it starts right now. So what exactly is compost? Well, the dictionary definition is recycled organic matter that has been decomposed and broken down. In our backyard garden, the organic matter that it's referring to would be things like kitchen scraps, yard trimmings, grass clippings, fallen leaves, spent crops, basically any plant material that is now considered waste. At its most simplistic form, composting is a process where gardeners such as you and I gather together in a pile all of our recycled organic matter and use oxygen, water, and microorganisms to break it down. We break it down far enough and long enough to the recognizable soil additive that you see here. That's it. There's nothing special or overly complicated about composting in any way, which is great. But how do we get started? Composting is an aerobic process that actually completes itself, meaning we can't stop it. Even if I do absolutely nothing, these pumpkins and this pile of organic matter is going to compost itself. We can, however, aid and speed up the process, which is what we're here for today. One quick tip when building your first compost is to have at least 2 sections. Either divide up your bin like I have here, or build 2 to 3 compost bins side by side. The reason for this is so that you can always have one bin providing compost while the other is actually working, being added to, and decomposing new organic matter. If you're constantly adding compost to a bin, it's never going to be ready for use because there's always going to be a fresh batch of waste added to the top. Instead, stagger your bins where one is always providing you with rich, awesome compost, and the other is acting as a repository for new organic waste. Then, when one bin is empty, switch it up to the other one, and you'll never miss a beat. Hey, before we get to the 5 tips on how you can become the ultimate composter, let's talk for a second on why we compost and why it's so beneficial. So why is this stuff so important? Why does compost have a direct effect on your garden's success? Well, over the years, I've observed 3 main benefits of adding compost to our garden that explain why. When added to a garden's soil, it provides beneficial structure to hard, compact, or even loose sandy soils. It does this by improving moisture retention, loosening tightly bound clay-type soils, while binding up the looser sandy mixes. And compost, when added to the top of your garden soil, can even prevent erosion from heavy rain. The second benefit of compost is that it adds valuable microorganisms in significant quantities back into your garden. It's no secret that a healthy, fertile soil is always teeming with microbial activity. They are directly correlated, and it is these microbes that are in your compost that are so essential to the nutrient cycles that are fundamental to supporting plant growth. No microbes means no nutrients, and no nutrients means no plant growth. Compost is literally more than meets the eye. The final benefit of adding compost to your garden is likely one that we already know, or we think we know, and that's nutrients. Compost itself contains a full spectrum of essential plant nutrients. This is known, and it does release those nutrients back nice and slowly, for long-term health and long-term sustainability for your garden. But it goes deeper than that. It's not just the micro and macronutrients that the compost adds back into your garden directly. It's the way that the compost behaves when it comes in contact with your soil. Compost literally boosts the bioactivity of your garden soil, essentially unlocking its full potential. Wow, good stuff, right? No wonder seasoned gardeners regard compost as the engine of their crops. So now that I've got you all excited about compost, let's dive into the 5 strategies that you need to implement to become a master composter. Strategy number 1 is to build your compost with the right ingredients. All organic matter will eventually break down, but not all organic matter is created equal and eventually isn't good enough. Your compost should be comprised of things like veggie scraps, yard trimmings, leaves, grass clippings, coffee grounds, eggshells, shredded newspaper, cardboard, and most other organic waste that is not an animal product. And I know it's tempting, but make sure to avoid pet droppings, meat, fish, and pretty much all milk products. The second strategy to an ultimate compost bin is air, specifically oxygen. Like we mentioned before, composting is an aerobic activity, meaning it consumes oxygen to complete its process. With a continuous air supply, aerobic decomposers are at their most efficient, optimal capacity, making shorter work of the decomposition cycle. Too compact or too wet, and the process will slow down and actually become anaerobic. This is noticeable by the odor of the compost becoming a wet, smelly mess. So to get more air into your compost, you can actually do 3 things. You can actually, take a pitchfork or even a shovel or a rake, and churn it up, constantly moving it around, getting that air into the middle of it. You can also add more dry material, if your compost does get too wet. Also, when you build your compost, you can build it using these air gaps that I've done here. You see it a lot in the pallet type compost that people build. It really is a great way to get air right into the middle of the compost. Speaking of being too wet, the third strategy for a successful compost is the right moisture level. In the beginning, you may need to wet down your compost to jumpstart it to get it going, but a well-seasoned compost should be able to self-regulate its moisture levels all on its own. Too dry, and the microbes actually become less efficient and their activity is extremely limited. Too wet, like we talked about before, and you run the risk of your compost becoming anaerobic, smelly, and inefficient. As a general rule, brown content such as brown leaves, paper, cardboard, dried up grass, wood, etc. will add dryness to your compost, and green material, such as freshly cut grass, fresh kitchen scraps, green leaves, and things of that nature are going to add moisture back to your compost. Play with the ratio of these things to get your moisture levels right. Another great strategy to having an efficient compost is particle size. It's simple. The smaller your inputs are, the faster they will compost and be usable. The reason is simple: surface area. Take any given piece of organic waste, dice it up into smaller sections, and it'll break down far faster than if you left it whole. For large composts such as mine, I don't worry too much about particle size. But for those little kitchen composters or those plastic tumblers, the particle size can be directly correlated to the efficiency of your composter. So if you're going to use a small compost bin, or if you want to speed things up, definitely get those particle sizes small. Lastly, but certainly not the least, we have what is called the C to N ratio, known as the carbon to nitrogen ratio, also known as the browns versus the greens. In a given compost, there's going to be a ratio of materials that are either high in carbon, known as brown items, or high in nitrogen, known as green items. Now, your carbon or brown items are going to be things such as wood chips, cardboard, dried leaves, newspaper, twigs, straw, nutshells, and so on. And your green items, or high nitrogen materials, are going to be things such as food waste, green grass clippings, kitchen scraps, pulled weeds, and even coffee grounds. The ideal ratio to keep a compost humming along nicely is about 25:1 carbon to nitrogen. Now, that doesn't mean 25 parts cardboard to 1 part green grass. Don't get that part confused. Even the freshest green grass by itself has a CN ratio of about 20:1 already. Cardboard, on the other hand, has a ratio of about 350:1. So, just by using these two ingredients, we can easily do the math to find out the right amounts of each input in a simplified hypothetical compost. In reality, however, your compost is going to have an infinite number of inputs and variables that make calculating the CN ratio almost impossible. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about it too much. Treat your compost as a vibrant, changing entity that you can alter and modify as you go along. Composted too dry and slow? Add some grass clippings. Has your pile turned anaerobic and a little bit smelly and wet? Hey, add some shredded cardboard or leaves. Your compost will respond amazingly well to just a small amount of this type of maintenance. Remember, it's not about monitoring the CN ratio every time you add something into your compost. That's not how it works. It's about observing and correcting your compost as you go along, when things maybe aren't working so well or it's not decomposing fast enough. That's where the successful composters really excel and keep their compost bins running like a well-maintained machine. Composting is a vast and infinitely complex subject. You can't be expected to learn it all in a single video. However, using these 5 strategies will most certainly give you a successful compost. Trust me. And it'll allow you to add back into your garden literally one of its most important components. Hey, if you've got any other composting strategies that you'd like to share with the community, make sure to leave it in the comments down below. Also, if any of you are on Facebook, head on over and join our gardening group called Growing Better. The group has grown phenomenally fast, yet it will never lose its sense of community or its welcoming feel. If you're passionate about growing epic organic fruits, herbs, and veggies for you and your family, the Growing Better group is a great place to hang out, share, learn, and grow. Hey, thanks for watching, guys. If you're getting value in this and the other series that I'm doing on YouTube, hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons if you'd be so kind, and I'll see you in the next video.